Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. Dustin Johnson is your 2020 Masters champion. He shoots a tournament score of -20. The parallels couldn't be any better except for the name. I don't think really Dustin Johnson being the guy to shoot 20 under really matters, but I also heard this on Twitter. The most low-key player won the most low-key Masters of all time. You know, it's 2020, it's COVID. No fans. It was just ho-hum. I mean, he didn't even mark the ball to putt it in or to hit the final putt of the tournament to win the tournament, which I thought was fantastic because I think it's kind of cheesy for someone to mark a 1-foot putt just to be the last one in. I understand the reason, but I'm glad to see Dustin didn't do that. He just did it like Dustin always does. So in this review video, I'm going to actually go over a recap of the bucket system. If you were with me during the round 4 showdown slate, there is some things to explain and really a lot to explain with the bucket system because, believe it or not, it did not fail despite what I was trying to hope for with the round 4 showdown. And then we're going to go through some other things that I kind of discovered while I was creating my lineups. So yeah, let's go ahead, get right into the spreadsheet. I feel like this is going to be kind of a longer video, so timestamps are in the description. They're all chapter mode is also enabled, so the little red progress bar will show which part of the video you're on and whatever part of the video you want to get to. You can also watch this in a faster speed, which I highly recommend. On desktop, there's a gear icon right down here. Drill down on that, you'll find playback speed. I prefer 1.5. Top right hand corner for mobile, there'll be like 3 dots that make a vertical line. Drill down on that, you'll find playback speed there. So again, this might be a little long, but it's worthwhile. I mean, it's the Masters. So let's go through this. We'll first start here with a recap. Your 2020 results: Dustin Johnson wins at 20 under, like I just said. Cam Smith and Sungjae Im both at 15 under. Cam Smith was a guy that was talked about a lot heading up to this tournament, and I guess on surface level, I'm not sure why, but we can go ahead and dig into it. Yeah, we'll get into it. Sungjae, on the other hand, you know, he's a relatively solid ball striker, so seeing him do well here is no surprise. But he'd been coming in with kind of middling recent form, so wasn't so much on Sungjae Im. I also wasn't so much on his bucket, but he was a last year too, so therefore he kind of extends that bucket a little bit more, and we'll get further into that as well. JT was a favorite among a lot of people. Personally, besides Dustin Johnson, my favorite was Rory. Shot himself in the foot on Thursday, shooting a 75, but I really thought Rory had a chance to come back even on Sunday's round, and he started off hot. He just cooled down tremendously. A couple poor mistakes kind of led him to that, but yeah, Rory, can't wait to get more into the, go to the DK spreadsheet part of this because there are a lot of things to discuss with that. Fratelli, CT Pan, those two guys came out of nowhere. And we'll also get into that with the spreadsheet, the DK part of it, that is. Brooks Koepka, Jon Rahm, they didn't disappoint. Kind of assumed, you know, they were going to do well at this golf course. Brooks kind of had a very ho-hum 10 under. He could easily have been 11 under. Missed the same putt he missed last year at the Masters on the final round on hole 18. I think he missed on the same side. No, he missed on the right side this time. He missed on the left last year. So that pin position kind of, I wouldn't say so much confusing him because it didn't so much matter, but he could have tied for 5th, which would have been so much more interesting. But now you see him tied for 7th with CT Pan and Jon Rahm. It kind of seems like it shouldn't be talked about. But either way, Jon Rahm finished pretty well. And then a couple guys there at 10 under, or not 10 under, 9 under, 10th place. Corey Connors, Patrick Reed, Webb Simpson. We'll get into talking about those guys as well. But what I like to actually first do on these review videos is go to the recent form tab, talk about the optimal lineup versus the winning lineup. And I should actually rename this because this would be the Millie Maker lineup. And let's go ahead and actually resize that. There we go. Okay, so the winning Millie Maker lineup had Dustin Johnson in it, Sungjae Im, Cameron Smith, Justin Thomas, Abraham Answer, and Cameron Champ. Used up all $50,000 worth of the salary. So again, we see that the whole fact of leaving money on the table doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, when more people talk about it and more times it shows that it doesn't matter to win a GPP, because he won it by himself. He won by 10 points, the actual winner of the Millionaire Maker. So $50,000. And I'll show you an easy way to get to those players because it uses the bucket system pretty brilliantly. 656.5 points. Now the optimal lineup scored 676 points, so almost a 20-point swing. You would have had to have used 49,100, meaning leaving 900 on the table. And the optimal lineup was Dustin Johnson, Sungjae Im, Cameron Smith, Justin Thomas, Dylan Fratelli, and Cameron Champ. Really interesting there because I talked a lot about pricing, and why don't we go ahead and actually look at the pricing. Go to salaries. So I spent a video talking about salaries. I don't have 2020 updated, but we can go ahead and bounce back between the two spreadsheets. If we were to look, basically every single year, minus last year, although last year we did, okay, so every single year we've had a 6K golfer inside the top 10. And I say not in 2019, but if we go to 2019, I think we have one just 12th place. Yeah, Justin Harding, who was a part of the optimal lineup. So you needed a 6K golfer, and how I started my lineups were actually considering salary first. I went more of a traditional route and went someone in the 10K, someone in the 9K, someone in the 8, 2 in the 7, and someone in the 6. We've seen that multiple times throughout the years. If we look at 2018, I believe we see it there. 10, 9, 8, 2 7s, and really you had another 7, but your optimal lineup would have been the 6K golfer with Cameron Smith in 2018. Now I see Cameron Smith's name and I'm like, shoot, he already had a top 10 here. I should have known that. Either way, you had a traditional approach there. In 2017, I believe it was somewhat traditional as well. The optimal lineup actually was, I mean, you left $1,700 on the table, but really you could have gotten there with going like Rory, Sergio, Justin. So a 10, 9, 8, 2 7s, and a 6. That's 50,000 right on the button. We talked about this in the pricing video. So I did a lot of my lineups that way. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, I didn't actually... I mean, I did think about this going 2 10K golfers because when you looked at the top of the salary leaderboard, let me go ahead and put a filter on this. When we look at the salary leaderboard, the golfers up here, I mean, you could have made I mean, everyone did actually, made a really good case as to why these guys were going to win. You had 1st, 5th, 7th, 4th, and obviously Bryson didn't show up, ended up getting 34th. But you had almost everybody 10K and above inside the top 5. I mean, like I said, John Rahm had an opportunity to. Think about that. You would have had 4 out of 5 golfers over 10K finish in the top 5. Like I said, I like Dustin Johnson, and it is largely because of the bucket system, but I will get there shortly. I really like Dustin Johnson, and if it wasn't Dustin, it was Brooks, for the same reason why I would play. I mean, you'll find out why, but it was either of those two guys, and I just didn't like the idea of pairing a 10K guy up with another one, because I fell in love with the idea of finding a a 9K and an 8K golfer. And like we had a lot of good 9K golfers. Webb Simpson, one of them that I really liked. Same with Xander. Xander gets another top 20 finish, so he will remain in the same bucket that he was this year. But like, there were a lot of good 9K golfers, and then there were a lot of good 8K golfers. You know, I was kind of, I mean, I like Bubba. Obviously, he didn't do well, but he was considered a 9K golfer for me. I did like Jason Day if I wasn't playing Dustin Johnson or Brooks Koepka, because they're both in the same bucket, which was this last year top 20, last week top 20. So DJ, you can see, Brooks, same thing. Those guys were in the same bucket. So I only wanted one of them. And obviously DJ was one of my favorites. But if he wasn't, if either of those guys weren't in it, then Jason Day was. But I did like the potential of Spieth. I did play a lot of Fowler. Didn't play a lot of Fleetwood. Played some Matsuyama. And Finau was actually in my Millie Maker lineup. I only played one. He was the 8K golfer that ended up being in my Millie Maker. Disappointing finish for him. But now he enters a last year bucket for next year that shows up inside the top 10 quite a bit. So again, we'll get there. So does Tiger, actually. So we'll get there. But yeah, 7K range was just, it was great. I was really on Louis. Louis and Justin Rose were my two favorite 7K golfers. But then when I was creating lineups, Abraham Answer became one of my favorites. And it was unfortunate. He played a really bad Sunday round, fell outside the top 10. Actually fell outside the top 5. He was tied for second heading into the final round. Just had a really poor showing. So yeah, I keep saying, let's get it, like, just wait till we get into the bucket system. Wait till we get into the DK page. Let's go ahead and get there, because there's a lot of stuff to explain, a lot of stuff to go over that I want to get to that I can't without showing you the spreadsheet. So now that we have it up, we're going to start from left to right on this spreadsheet. I don't necessarily want to talk about this. I kind of did during the showdown slate, but you can kind of see you wanted to grab 3. You know, whenever it says 3, you wanted to grab 3 of those golfers. Obviously, you couldn't with the pricing. So, like, that's something you had to think about. This would have been the same as last year's Finau. This would have been the same as last year's Webb. So, I mean, we had 2 Finau Webbs. You know, I would have said you only needed to grab 1. But I actually didn't put this out there on the strategy video. This was for me when creating lineups. I was kind of identifying golfers in this mold that we saw last year. And that we see a lot. And let's shoot. I don't want to go there yet. I want to start with the bucket system. I had said from the very beginning, from strategy, actually the bucket system video to the strategy video to the round 4 showdown, you wanted a 1-1, a 1-2, a 2-1, a 3-1, and a 4-1. Those 5 buckets. 1-1, check. 1-2, check. 4-1, check. We're missing 2-1 and we're missing 3-1. Now, the 2-1 easily could have been Abraham Answer. I mean, he was in the Millie Maker lineup. He's not in the optimal, but he was the 2-1 that I liked a lot when constructing lineups. The next favorite I had was Sebastian Munoz. Those were my favorite 2-1s, and they were both inside the top 5 heading into Sunday. But being rookies, that's kind of what the last year 2 bucket resembles, are rookies. Not all, they're just golfers who didn't play in the Masters last year. But either way, out of the last year bucket 2s, he was one of my, those 2 golfers were one of my favorites, both of them. And both of them had a very terrible Sunday round. Either way, I don't think Munoz or Abraham Answer would have lost you a lot of money. Sure, it would have probably kicked you out of first place, but they both did pretty well. So nothing to really worry about too much. And actually, I need to put a filter on this. So let's do this and then sort by this once again. Okay. So yeah, missing a 2-1. And then during the round 4 showdown slate, I was really talking about 3-1s. really wanted a 3-1 to finish well, to finish inside the top 10. I was almost willing it to happen. And I had said if. And I also said there may not be a 3-1 in the top 10. So if you did ride my coattails on that, hey, the warning was there, and the players that fit that bucket weren't the greatest. Now, who were they? It was Justin Rose as one of them. Paul Casey was another. And then Matt Wallace was another. Now, Wallace kind of came out pressing. I think hole 1, he tried getting, like he went for the pin and missed in the wrong spot. And then tried getting cute with a chip, tried getting cute with another chip, and ended up tripling the first hole, which pretty much took him out of it. Now, he scrambled all the way back. I shouldn't say all the way back, but he did have a lot of birdies in that final round. So his score wasn't that terrible, you know, when it came to how many DraftKings points he scored, but he had a triple, he had a double, I think he had 3 other bogeys, and he may have only had 4 or 5 birdies. I don't remember, but either way, Matt Wallace did not show up the way we wanted him to. Neither did Paul Casey or Justin Rose. So the 3-1 bucket doesn't even show up. And last year 3 doesn't even show up inside the top 10 or inside the top 20, which is kind of interesting. If we were to go ahead and just filter out all but the last year 3s, I mean, most of them you can see they're older guys. You know, golfers who, the last year 3 bucket were golfers who missed the cut the year before. So you can see right here, a lot of these guys you could just easily cross off. I mean, Mike Weir was another one that I could have easily crossed off. But the other last year 3s, you know, we had a really good shot at having one of these guys inside the top 10. It's just that no one showed up. So unfortunately, that bucket goes 0 for top 10s, top 5s, but it still remains last year bucket 3. And I'll show that here shortly. So yeah, last year 3 didn't make it. And like I said, last year 2 was very close. Or I mean, I shouldn't say last year 2. A 2-1 was very close. But we saw a 5-1 now finish inside the top 5 and top 10. But we also see a 5-4 in Corey Connors. Now, Corey Connors snuck up there. Had a really good round 4. It still counts, right? He was kind of that Finau guy. But yeah, it still counts. I'm going to be more pessimistic about it because it isn't a bucket that you normally would see. But I also have to say, he did only finish 10th. And he was not in the optimal lineup. He was also not in the GPP winning lineup. Either way, he did well. And I will concede to that. For the most part, though, the bucket system was really good. Here's my fault. Not so much my fault, but I tend to do this too much when it comes to the bucket system. This is the mistake I fall into. I get married to the bucket combinations. And let's go ahead and pull up the bucket system page. So I've already filled in all of the 2020 stats for top 5, top 10. You can see none of the buckets actually change. Number 1 bucket for, actually we go here, we do the top 10, but we can look at the top 5 also. Your number 1 bucket will always be golfers who finished first to 20 the year before. Number 2 bucket, golfers who missed the cut last year. That changes when we get to top 10, by the way. Oh, here's a change. The 21 to 40 range. I'm going to take all that back. I primarily use this the same as I use it down here. But maybe I'll update it. These should change. So what was this? Were they all tied before? So yeah, they were 2, and I gave this one a 3 for whatever reason. I'll have to revisit that, but I don't go by top 5s. I go by top 10s. Your number 1 bucket, again, first to 20. Your number 2 bucket, golfers who did not play the year before. That goes up by 3, so that one's going to continue being up there. Oh, we do have a change. So our last year 4s will now be last year 3s. So when we look at this in April, this bucket will have changed. The totals have changed. 3 ones, 4 ones, or whatever. It'll be a little bit different. So now we'll have to update the entire bucket, everything. But that's fine. The last week buckets don't change at all. Did not plays still stay up there at the top. 6 of them, by the way. The last week 2s are golfers who finished first as 20th the week before. That still stays the same as the number 2 bucket. Number 3 bucket stays the same. So does the 4. Although we had 2 finish inside the last week 5, that still stays the last week 5. So that's how they all change. But what I was saying prior to is I fell in love with the bucket combinations, and a lot of it had to do, you can see I updated the 2021, so you can see the ones there. But what I ended up doing was I fell in love with the fact of going like this, you know, seeing all of these buckets and going, okay, well, we've seen a 4-1, a 3-1, 2-1, a 1-1, and a 1-2, you know, every single year. Not so much a 5-1, but if I kept going through and going like this, it's like, wow, we're seeing this consistently. You know, just these 3 years, 2019, 2018, 2017, you saw it. A 1-1, a 2-1, a 3-1, a 1-2, and a 4-1. I know that was kind of a weird order, but still, I can go through all of these, and even back to 2016, the same thing applies. Now, 2015, I don't think we really see that. I think we miss a 2-1 and a 4-1. So there are times that it happens. It's just, that's how it goes. I think one of the best wildcats were the 5-1s, because we've seen 5-1s inside the top 10 before. We've seen a last year 5 multiple times. And Cameron Champ ends up being a 5-1 to just kind of fill in that mold of other 5-1s that show up. So it's super interesting. But yeah, it was interesting. I fell in love with the bucket combinations instead of the buckets. If we go back to the DK page, you know, you had a bunch of last year 1 buckets there. You had a few last year 2 buckets. We had last year 4 buckets. We just didn't see a last year 3. So like the bucket system as a whole did well. You know, last year 3s didn't show up, but you know, during the bucket system video and every strategy video I talk about, I go over the percentages. You know, what's the likelihood of a last year 3 finishing inside the top 10? Well, prior to this year, if we looked back, we had 1 year where there was 0. So it wasn't 100% given that that bucket was going to actually finish inside the top 10 just by looking at past stats. But also, you know, if you're creating lineups, you know, this is 7 years worth of data. 6 out of 7 is 85%. Now, if you would have created 85% of your lineups with a 3-1 in it, you know, at least 15% give you some flexibility to go elsewhere. I told you there were 4 options you could choose from. Either you go 0%, you go 100%. You either look at this over the last 7 years and you think, okay, what will this one be? What will this year be? Will we have 0 or will we have at least 1? And if we do have 1, then it's going to be 7 out of 8 years. Do that percentage. So 7 out of 8 years, that's what, 85%? No, that's 6 out of 7. It's like 88%, close to 90. Or you go the opposite route and you go 6 out of 8 years, which ends up being like 62.5%. So maybe you go that route, and again, that would leave you flexibility. But I think those were your 4 options. And of course, if you don't believe in the bucket system, that's fine. But the last year 3 buckets, I mean, you didn't have to put a last year 3 bucket in. If you just look at last year 1 buckets, your minimum was 2. If you were to look at the next one, last year 2s, minimum was 1. You know, I guess you could have went this route. Or if you're like, I don't really like anyone in the last year 3 bucket, which, hey, I wouldn't have blamed you. then you go higher. You know, 2 was the minimum, but the next minimum was 3. And if you went up from 1, you go to 2. There's 5 golfers you're choosing from just out of the last year 1 and last year 2 bucket. And had you done that, well, you wouldn't have been able to do it with the last year 1s. You could only select 2. You know, if we go back here, you know, DJ would have been 1 and JT could have been the other. These guys were in the optimal lineup, so there you go. But then if you were like, okay, I need to find a last year 2, who are your favorite last year 2s? I would have still stayed with Abraham Answer, but at $7,400, that's not terrible. I would not have gone with Dylan Fratelli. But we could easily went to like Sung J M. So 74, 75. You know, we have 4 positions already taken. Well, what about our favorite, you know, going at other buckets, looking at other buckets? I mean, if you liked Cam Smith, 5-1, that's 7,300. And now it's going to be like looking at prices, right? You're not so much looking at buckets. Who would be your favorite guy that is basically, well, 7,100 or less? Because that's what you could do with these 5 golfers in your core. Maybe it's Cameron Champ. He was in the optimal lineup. He is a 2-1. You know, that was one of the bucket combinations that I did like. So really, we're only missing the 3-1s if you include Cam Champ, who finished 19th. Again, he was in the optimal lineup, scored 93.5 points. You can't see that, but he scored 93.5 points. So yeah, like, to me, I know this is long-winded, and I know I kind of explained it, maybe over-explained it, but looking at the buckets, you could have went 3. Actually, let's do that. If we were looking at our favorite plays, again, Dustin Johnson was one of my favorite. But let's say I liked Rory as my 4-1. Now, who is my other last year 1 that I can choose from? I probably can't. Maybe I only go with 1. So this might be my 1-1. Here, let's just do this for argument's sake. Let's just start with our 2 last year 1s. Say JT is our favorite. And then we're like, okay, can't really get to another last year 1 that I like. Who's my favorite last year 2? And we look at the bucket combination. So I have my 1-1, my 1-2. Let's go 2-1 and say it's Cameron Champ. So then we go from there and go to our 3-1s, and maybe we don't like any of them. We already saw them on the screen. They weren't a good group of golfers. You would have thought maybe Rose or, Rose or Casey would have done well. I'm just looking at points. So 75. I mean, he fell 1 behind Abraham Answer. Not 1. He fell 5 points behind Abraham Answer. So you could have put Justin Rose in there at 7,700. It would have been difficult with pricing, but maybe you get to someone, maybe you like Sebastian Munoz as well, 85.5. I don't know. But either way, you could have easily gotten to a workable lineup. So 1-1, 1-2, 2-1. Probably couldn't play a 4-1 that was worthwhile. To me, it would have been Louis. So like Louis, Cam Champ, JT, DJ. We're looking at 14,300 left over. So if we went with like Cameron Smith, now I have 7,000 left. I need to find someone under 7K. To me, it would have been Sebastian Munoz. So that I could have gone that way. So I would have had 1, 2. I'd had 2 last year 2s, 1 last year 4, a 1-2, a 1-1, and then last year 5 in Cam Smith. Okay, so that may have been complicated for you guys. But if it was complicated for you, I would say it was probably because you weren't watching the strategy video. You weren't watching the bucket system video. I would highly encourage you to do so. And if you don't, just know this is all based off of last year and last week finishes. So it's just an analysis that I've provided. The lower the number, the better. So that's kind of how that goes. I want to get into kind of a beefier chunk of this data. Something that I saw during, I'm trying to find where I want to go with this. I'm going to go ahead, unfreeze this. So what I'm trying to get at is I found a pretty interesting chunk of data of just findings. Let's put it that way. I found something interesting. Looking over the last 3 years, or actually really the last 6 years of data. If I go to 2019, and I did this in the round 4 showdown. But if I go here and look at our top 10, the one thing I want you guys to note, everyone inside the top 10 does not have negative tee to green stats. So if we go to 2020 and look, this would be the same stat line, the baseline that I used last year. Everybody except for CT Pan had positive tee to green stats. I don't think anyone's getting on CT Pan. Honestly, I don't think anyone would have. I don't think it really matters to highlight this. CT Pan wasn't a game changer when it came to the optimal lineup or the winning GPP lineup. So I'm not going to talk about CT Pan. But the rest of them had positive tee to green stats. And I went all the way back to 2013. And I think I saw one other guy that had negative tee to green stats. But for the most part, everybody had positive tee to green stats. And all of the columns over on the left side here all have to do with their particular stats. So for instance, web, the web grouping are golfers who had everything positive except for off the tee. So that was your web group. So everyone every stat was positive except for off the tee. So I mean, if you were to group golfers that way, let me clear, and I did this for everyone that followed under that suit. Here were all your web golfers. If I told you needed to choose one out of them, it might have been easy. I would have said go with your best bucket combination. Sebastian Munoz was my favorite. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you guys. He was my favorite. But Cam Smith is right there. So super interesting to see that. Looking at current result once again, our Finale group, we had 2 guys finish inside the top 10. Everything was positive except for around the green. So I kind of mad scientist this, and I took into account everything. I mean, I stayed up super late Wednesday creating lineups because all I was doing was trying to compare bucket combinations with stats and thinking stats mattered. I mean, stats do matter, but I wanted to come up with that perfect formula. And I mean, it was close. I knew DJ was a part of it. I knew he was a part of it. I would have assumed Rory would have been a part of it, but he wasn't. He's not, in a group that is similar to anything else. But yeah, you can see the grab 2s, the grab 3s. 9186 just comes from last year. The top guys here was, who was it? I wonder if I have a filter. Okay, here we go. It was Jason Day and Francesco Molinari were the 9186s. And those were golfers who had negative approach. But everything else was positive. So, Rory almost fit that mold, but he obviously didn't with the minus in around the green. But Webb Simpson fit that mold, as did Abraham Ancer. So, you could have easily gotten on those 2 golfers, and that's not a terrible way to begin your lineups. Like, if you were to go DJ to Webb, so you got your 1-1, your 1-2, then Abraham Ancer to fill out the 9186. So now you got those 2 guys. We need to find another grab 3 golfer. I think a lot of these guys are probably a little too expensive. I would have probably gone to Louis Oosthuizen. So there's my 4-1 also. So 1-2, 1-1, 2-1, 4-1. I have all of my buckets except for the 3-1. And really, I don't think any of our 3-1s fell under a particular bucket. Yeah, none of them did. Maybe that was a tell, honestly. No lie. I look at that kind of stuff and it makes sense to me. You know, Matt Wallace didn't fall under that at all. He had negative around the green and negative putting. And that kind of showed too. Like his around the green game was not good. But either way, I'm not going to sit here and try to continue making lineups, but I mean, there's 4. Kind of pricing do I have? I can work with $15,000, so you know, I need a web, so obviously we could go Cam Smith, and I need a Finau, could go here. That's 49,400. You know, I don't know. I'm gonna definitely look into this next year and look at bucket combinations to go with it. 3-1s didn't even fall under it, so whatever. Like I said, I was married to the bucket combination idea when really you use the bucket combination as a weighing tool. Like you're weighing one last year 3 versus another. Do they have the preferred bucket combination? If so, and you know, it makes sense to play them. You know, like it wouldn't make sense to play like Fred Couples being a 3-1, but like Paul Casey or Justin Rose, yeah, that makes sense. So super interesting with that. But yeah, the stats. I thought it was, again, CT Pan is kind of the mold breaker here, but everyone else kind of falls under line or under that guy. So let's look at everybody who has negative stats. I don't want TD or strokes gained total. I want TD green. So we'll go less than 0 and take a look. So we had 3 golfers finish inside the top 20. We had a bunch of guys make the cut. So we had 20 guys make the cut. Weird. 20 out of 30 made the cut. But no one finished inside the top 20. 3 out of 40. Is that right? 3 out of 30, sorry. Made the cut. So 10%. Or not made the cut, sorry. 3 out of 30 finished top 20. And one of them finished top 10. So that's negative tee to green for the season long. If we were to look to see what their tee to green stats were, I'm actually going to sort by this. You wouldn't have been able to tell. Like we had 5 golfers that had positive recent form tee to green. Oh, that's off the tee. My bad. Still, we had 5, but no one really did that well. And a lot of this has to come from what tournament they're playing in, essentially. So either way, 30 total golfers who had negative tee to green stats. And 3 of them finished inside the top 20. That was it. But either way, that's kind of something we don't see a lot of, or we haven't seen a lot of. It's worth mentioning, though. Let's see here. Can we see anything with recent form versus baseline? So we have a bunch of positive golfers, you know, in their last 7 events, scoring more DraftKings points than their average. Dylan Fratelli just a little bit under, but everyone else over. I guess let's see what that looks like if we go from top to bottom. A couple missed cuts here. See a bunch of top 20s. So we have 3 missed cuts. A bunch of top 20s. Maybe if we go the opposite way, what do we see? More like, you know, I'd say worse performances. Dylan Fratelli really being the best out of all of that. How about scoring average? So scoring average, this is their scoring average underneath their, okay, so it's their recent form play. Is their scoring average underneath their baseline? For these guys that are negative, that means they're playing better. Golfers that have a negative score are golfers playing better than their baseline. Okay, so that makes sense. Green means good with these stats. When we flip it the other way, Dylan Fratelli, Rory McIlroy, Scotty Scheffler really being the only guys who, not so much Scotty Scheffler, but McIlroy and Fratelli being the only guys that scoring average being a little higher than their baseline. not really hurting out, you know, not really being that bad. I don't really care about differential, really. Nah. Rounds under 70, so the higher the number, the better. Obviously, this didn't matter. When we look at recent form, you know, like Eric Van Rooyen's recent form was much better than his. I mean, his recent form rounds under 70% is better than his baseline by 52.27%. Yeah, he typically has a 22.73, and he was at 75. So I guess we could understand he was going to come down to earth a little bit, right? I mean, look at all of that. That's all bad. But if we were to go from this, your baseline, that's a lot of golfers inside the top 20 as opposed to the other way around. Yeah. So looking at that stat wouldn't have been terrible, honestly. Should have probably taken it more into account. This is pretty good. Again, this is recent form versus baseline. So Green is good. Dustin was obviously 10 shots better total. That's only one tournament, I believe, than his baseline. So interesting to see there. But still, this is, again, recent form versus baseline stats. Look at everybody inside the top 10. This is disgusting. The approach didn't matter, but off the tee mattered, which to me makes a lot of sense. If you're hitting your driver better, it's going to show. But look at that. 1st, 7th, 5th, 2nd. Oh, this is gross. Could have easily gone here and found a good core of players. Approach, not something I care that much about. Also don't really care much about around the green. But again, you see a bunch of guys inside the top 20, and putting. Let's see what negative putting looks like. Pretty much the same. I knew you wanted positive putters coming into this tournament. Yeah, you got a second place guy here in Cameron Smith having the second best. Actually, no. That's not completely true, is it? Oh, I don't have any filters on. Okay. I thought I had a filter on, but I didn't. So either way, positive putting, second place guy, fourth place guy. You know, you don't want to fade good putters at Augusta, but you also don't want to go all in on it. Every single year we see positive putting, but we do see negative putting as well. So if I go ahead and go by current result and we look at the putting, you know, negative stat for Telly, John Rahm, but barely. But everyone else has positive putting stats. Again, except for Fratelli and Rahm. So, oh man, super interesting, honestly. I guess let me sort by. Let's actually talk left to right on this tournament information. So, everyone who was highlighted basically they had a scoring average underneath the field average. And the different colors mattered differently. So I would recommend watching the strategy video. Dark green just was like their recent form scoring average as well as their baseline scoring average were beneath field average. And depending on who they're playing with, you know, light green or yellow means they're playing with another guy that either had one of the scoring averages underneath the field average. So yellow and green were pretty good. Red means they were the only golfer in their group that had only one scoring average under field average, whether it was recent form. Actually, it was just recent form. I didn't do baseline. It was just recent form. So like Cameron Smith's recent form scoring average, 68.08, was underneath the field average of 69.95. So seeing this top to bottom, you know, Dylan Fratelli was not in one of those groups. Neither was Corey Connors or Mark Leishman. But everyone else was highlighted up here, and that kind of makes sense. So a little bit of it is going by scoring average. A lot of it kind of goes by what group you're playing in. So like this was a pretty good group. Webb Simpson, Mark Leishman, Hideki Matsuyama. I don't think you're too disappointed. Maybe price-wise you are, but with their finishes. Interesting to see CT Pan and Corey Connors together. Wow. Think about pairing those guys up. What type of salary relief you would have had. Sometimes I wish I just had unlimited money to make unlimited lineups, because you could, I mean, obviously lineup construction is endless. But as I'm going through this, you can kind of see this was a disappointing group. Rahm, Oosthuizen, and DeChambeau. You could actually chalk that up to DeChambeau just not playing that well, because he was the talk of the town. He also was probably the most polarizing golfer on the course with how bad he was doing, and kind of, I wouldn't say his antics. He wasn't like doing terrible with his antics, but he had a lot of golf balls that were lost that needed searching. So that kind of breaks up the rhythm and vibe of a group, and it's something to consider going forward. Anyone who's playing with Bryson might get negatively affected. Looking at Xander, group wasn't terrible. This group I thought should have done better. You know, Patrick Reed finished inside the top 10. Finau, disappointing. Same with Casey, although Casey wasn't coming in with good stats. None of these groups really panned out. You know, Lanto was a golfer that had both of his scoring averages underneath the field average, but not in a good group. You know, maybe that's what negatively affected Lanto. Could have been. Very easy. Interesting group here. I didn't have any faith in Gary Woodland. Something's wrong with him. Yeah, that's all I gotta say about that. Yeah, a lot of these groups really aren't panning out. Sebastian Munoz, the only guy in his group, with Benny Ann and Ches Reavie. Really not seeing any good groups. Like this was supposed to be kind of a dynamite group, but Morikawa doesn't have the shot shape for this course, and neither does Tyrrell Hatton. But we'll get to that like shortly. Rowe or Justin Thomas, Brooks Koepka, Matthew Fitzpatrick. I liked JT and Koepka. Didn't so much care for Fitzpatrick, but like his scoring average was good enough, and he barely made the cut. So I thought he would have done better than that. Here we go. Here's a really good showing as to what a group can do. DJ, Rory, and Patrick Cantlay. Now, they all did different things on Saturdays and Sundays. Really, DJ was the only person in this group that did really well on Thursday and Friday when they were playing together. But either way, you know, pairing them up together will slingshot them a little bit to doing better. But yeah, I guess not really many groups that were put together outside of like really expensive golfers did well. Okay. Didn't really see much. Kind of want to see what DK points were. Oh, I suppose. Yeah. Never mind. But here you go. You can have all the DK points up here. Let's see if I'm out of the way. There you go. Here's a column of DK points. One of the interesting things that I went over was shot shape. That was on the dream sheet. And super interesting, we see nothing but fade golfers up at the top. I have a couple notes in here that says that they can shape it both ways. We really didn't see Sungjae shape it like for a draw on some of the holes. But what I'm finding out is really there are only certain holes. And I think this actually goes back to when the Masters, or I should say, when no one was really hitting the ball that far, where you really needed to shape shots. I think the whole stigma and attitude that you need a draw golfer for the Masters has been present ever since that. What we're seeing now is golfers can lay up further back where you don't have to go around a dog leg, or you can at least hit a 3-wood that you can shape a little easier to go around a dog leg, and then from there use a, you know, you're not using like a 1-iron or a 5-wood, but you're using like a 4, maybe a 5-iron to reach some of these greens. So you don't necessarily need to shape shots. Because the golf ball is going a little further than usual, golfers can hit their irons a little bit further, and they have more control on their irons. So it is interesting to see shot shape like this. Sure, we have a couple draws up here. Cam Smith, actually, I watched a lot of his golf. I don't know why it says fade. This is definitely a draw. So Cam Smith, watching him play most of Sunday, and this is wonderful. So, okay, let me finish the Cam Smith thing and then come back to what I was just going to jump to. A lot of his shots that he hit were draws. And basically what determines a shot shape for me is if you have a straightforward hole, like say hole 15 at Augusta, I'm looking to see what you're doing off the tee. Now, you want to be positioned on the right side of the fairway, so hitting a fade off the tee makes sense, and if golfers did that, that's awesome. I'm looking at that second shot. It doesn't even matter really where you miss it. If you miss it a little left where you actually have to curve it around the trees, that makes sense. But more pin positions on that hole required a draw to get anywhere close. So basically seeing the second shot on 15 was a big one. There's another hole that required a draw. I'll say this. Anyone on hole 10, if they were hitting 3-wood off of the tee to draw the ball, that's one thing. If they're hitting driver, okay, so two things here. I get it. Some of the long hitters need to hit 3-wood off that hole, but I will also say if they're not comfortable drawing the golf ball with their driver and they have to go to 3-wood to draw the golf ball, that is an indication they can't draw the golf ball. Cam Smith could draw it around that corner. He could also do it on hole 2, hole 9. Those are all holes he could draw. So basically what I was getting at, or what I was going to jump to, is the Masters did a wonderful job capturing everyone's shot. I was actually able to go through every single golfer except for, well, I wasn't able to go through Trevor Immelman since he didn't show up, or he withdrew. But I went through every player and watched all of their shots, typically on hole 15, because that was a big one to me. Also, hole 3 was another one. Hole 18. Let me back up. You can tell someone's shot shape and their comfortability with it based off of a few holes at Augusta. Hole 18 is one of them. Hole 18, if you can hit a fade, I mean, golfers who hit a fade on hole 18 are going to go into that hole with the utmost confidence, and they're just going to have a normal shot. It's not going to be defensive. It's going to be a full released shot. Golfers who go in that hole who have to hit a 3-wood or, you know, keep missing left or slice it too far right, those are golfers who don't primarily hit a fade. So those are golfers that you can combine that information with what they do on hole 15 to determine how well they hit a draw. So you can go ahead, look back at every golfer like I did. That's kind of what I used. And if I still wasn't unsure, I kept going back to other holes. Like hole 4 is a good hole to see what they do. If the pin was on the left, can they draw the golf ball? The pin's on the right, can they fade the golf ball? What did they end up doing? Where was their miss? And yeah, that was my analysis on a lot of their shot shapes. So yeah, Cam Smith, the draw, but the rest of them pretty much a fade. So either way, interesting. Maybe we just don't care about draws and fades when we come into this tournament in April. Last thing I kind of want to touch on is looking at their home region. So look at how many golfers were in the Southeast. And actually, Sungjae Im just bought a house in Atlanta. He finally bought a house. It's going to be Georgia. It'll be in the Southeast. This will change to Southeast. So really, you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 golfers. I mean, it doesn't count, really. 5 golfers. 6, 7 golfers in that Southeast region. Used to this temperature, used to this type of, I wouldn't even say so much say grass, because usually in the Southeast it's Bermuda. But either way, you're not far from home. This is, I wouldn't say it's a home course, but turns out that this is helpful for some of these guys. You see a lot of Southeast golfers on here, and a lot of it makes sense, right? They're all kind of, they use Florida as the no income tax state. Can't remember if Texas is another one. So you see a lot of Texas up here. You see a lot of Florida. It makes sense, but it's kind of interesting seeing all the Southeast golfers in their region up here. And you can also use their college region for even further proof that they do well at a golf course like this. So like Patrick Reed fits into that mold. Really the only people that don't would be John Rahm and Dylan Fratelli and Sung Jae Im. But either way, interesting thing to look at. I'm probably going to be more about stats, more about this is interesting, looking at grass stats. But either way, I'm going to look more like at bucket system. Maybe now I incorporate a little bit of the grass stats. Really what I want to look at are golfers like Dylan Fratelli. Dylan Fratelli, CT Pan, golfers you typically don't see up at the top of a leaderboard just to see what their overall grass stats were. For the most part, a lot of these golfers, decent to good. Not tremendously great by any means. DK average would have been a good one to go with too. Like Cam Smith, 100 points. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. Recent form, man. I can't wait to start using this for further tournaments. I mean, the Dream Sheet is going to be basically created for every tournament now. So we'll be going through everything. And I will be including the Masters information to that. I don't think they do strokes gained information, but I can easily go with scoring data as well as DK points and recent form average. So definitely will be using that going forward. So I'm going to conclude this video. I don't think there really is anything else to say about this. It was a fun tournament. It was a tournament I typically do well at. I put in, I think, $90 and made $70. So lost 20, which was unfortunate. Had an opportunity. If Abraham Answer would have came through, I would have had, I think I could have added $80 to my my total. So I'd have been up by like, I'd have been up $60. That was about it. But either way, 60 is better than nothing. So unfortunate, but hey, that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. I am going to, shortly after this video, start working on the RSM Classic and going to go over some of that information. Or I think I'm going to put out a preview video. I'm going to change up how I do videos. Sundays we'll have previews. Mondays we'll have course fit. And then Tuesdays we'll have the strategy videos. This should take less time for me to do. The videos should be shorter, so it'll be nicer to go about it that way. So basically we'll have I think most weeks Sundays will be preview and review. So review of the previous tournament, preview of the next one, and then strategy as well as course fit. So be tuned or stay tuned for that. But for now, thank you for watching. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.